I believe most people are good. And if we do turn off the news, it won't look half as bad as we think. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? So, in the teachings of Lao Tzu, which are about 2,500 years old, and what I love is how relevant they are still today, he said this: those who want to know the truth of the universe should practice the 4 cardinal virtues. The first one that I spoke on last week was a reverence for all of life. And that manifests itself as unconditional love and respect for self and for all other beings. The second virtue is natural sincerity. And that manifests as honesty, as simplicity, as faithfulness. And the third is gentleness. And that shows up as kindness, consideration for others, sensitivity to our spiritual truth. And the fourth one being supportiveness, which is about service to others without expectation of a reward. So these virtues, according to Lao Tzu, gives birth to the wisdom and evokes the 5 blessings of health, wealth, happiness, longevity, and peace. And as I mentioned last week, those virtues do not represent any external dogma. They're reflective of our original nature, of who we truly are. And when we live by them, what we're doing is we're aligning ourselves with our source of all things, our source of life, and allows us to access all that power that we do have within. So the suggestion that comes with the virtue I'm speaking about today, which is natural sincerity, is be true to yourself. That's key. When we're completely honest and sincere, we then don't have that need to explain ourselves or our actions to anybody. We're comfortable where we are with who we are. We stand in our own truth. We draw our own conclusions and our own solutions from within. We go to our source for those. We're living a life that reflects choices coming from respect and from affection for our true nature, for our higher self. And the most vital thing that we can do in this practice is to make sincerity our most significant attribute, to walk our talk, to remain sincere and honest in everything we say and in everything that we do. We make a commitment to do everything in our power at the level of our consciousness to live up to what we say we're going to do. To remember that when we're living our life from the perspective of our truest nature, that we are aligning with that source of all that is. And that is the very foundation of living a spiritual life. Once we get to the point that we know ourselves, that we trust life, we also know that we trust and we can trust in the divine that created us. And when we live from that honesty, from that sincerity and faithfulness, according to our higher self, we won't feel that need to justify who we are. And we won't need to justify how we behave in the world. We'll know who we are. We're comfortable in that space. Mother Teresa said, honesty and transparency make you vulnerable. Be honest and transparent anyway. Vulnerability, not a bad thing. Webster defines honesty as honorable, characterized by integrity and straightforwardness in conduct, in thought, and in speech. Walking your talk, being who you are, being true to yourself. As human beings, we make countless mistakes. And that's completely different from being insincere or dishonest. The greatest single obstacle that I know of to living that authentic life that we desire is when we profess our beliefs and live our lives in contradiction to those beliefs. Honesty, sincerity, openness to life are absolutely essential if we're to stay in integrity and to be honest with ourselves and with others as well. Because when we're not honest with ourselves, we can't be honest with others. And that in turn will translate into a lack of trust in life itself, in that higher power. So we want to look at that. Do we really want to be afraid of the heights that Spirit can take us to? Or do we want to learn to contain and utilize Spirit to help transform our lives into more, into better? When we open up and we see our true selves, what we're made of, who we truly are, we will very likely find some bits and pieces that can be a little challenging. That shouldn't stop us, though, from opening up and looking. That's what we're called to do. We can open our hearts wider than we ever have before. We can become more vulnerable. And that vulnerability, you know what that does? It serves to help soften those judgments that maybe we've been carrying around. Maybe they've been dictating our life. Maybe they have really had a huge influence on our attitudes and our behaviors. And sometimes we don't see them. So once we become comfortable with opening up and being vulnerable and honest with ourselves, we can see our own idiosyncrasies. Yes, you all have them, so ha-ha. Or those unexpected beliefs or thoughts or ideas. And we can become more comfortable with them. We can become more accepting of them. Because then we'll realize that they're just part of who we are. They are part of who we are, not who we are. Part of our shadow selves. And that shadow self is a necessary element of our human nature. We can openly and honestly ask ourselves this: where do I run up against a wall when I look into my own heart? By opening up, we become transparent. We become revealed for exactly who we are, not who we wish we were. Now, yes, that can be a bit scary. At the same time, it is so necessary for our own spiritual growth. Our spirituality stems from the ordinariness of our human life. And it's made transparent by a lifelong tending to our true nature. Our depressions, our jealousies, our failures, those things that we ordinarily don't like to look at are not at odds with living a spiritual life. That's a terrible misconception. They are actually essential to our spiritual life. Thomas More wrote a book, several actually, but Care of the Soul, and he recounts the following story. The Greeks told the story of the Minotaur, the bull-headed, flesh-eating man who lived at the center of the labyrinth. He was a threatening beast, yet his name was Asterion, which means star. I often think of this paradox as I sit with someone with tears in their eyes, searching for some way to deal with a death, a divorce, or depression. It is a beast, this thing that stirs in the core of their being, but it is also the star of their innermost nature. We have to care for this suffering with extreme reverence so that in our fear and anger at the beast, we do not overlook the star. It's a pretty powerful thought. So living at a soul level is a dimension of experiencing life and ourselves. It has to do with depth, with value, with relatedness, with heart, with personal substance. Our soul, our higher self, is after more insight than it is after truth. Truth implies a stopping point, right? Truth. We got it now. No. Insight. Insight is a fragment of awareness that invites further exploration. Isn't that what we're all looking for? Is some insight. Our intellect, however, tends to enshrine the truth. And our spirit looks forward to the fact that insights will keep coming until some degree of wisdom is achieved. It's amazing how often we think we'll be better off without the things that really bother us, that really upset us, that have what we call a negative effect on our life. However, these things are necessary in our human experience. They have great value because behind them and with them and through them is great growth. When we regard the soul with an open mind, we'll find messages that lie within an illness, an event. Corrections can be found in remorse and other uncomfortable feelings. Changes required by a time of depression or anxiety. Those experiences take us deep, and they indeed are essential to our growth, to our well-being as a human being. Often people will neglect their own nature and be distressed by the images of some ideal normality because they don't experience that normality, whatever that means, right? Whatever that looks like. It is the spirit within that makes us human. And it is when we are most human that we have the greatest access to our higher self. We begin accessing our higher self by observing that spirit within the way it is, not for what we wish it to be. We find that deep respect for what is actually there, who we are, and what it's trying to teach us. There's always a lesson in everything that we go through in our life. We want to work with that to find the gift in that so-called mess, that ugly situation. Sometimes it's really difficult, and I know this from personal experience, sometimes it's really difficult to honor the soul's dramatic way of expressing itself. I'm inviting you to listen and look carefully at what's revealed in the suffering that you experience. Because here, this is really important. Going directly to healing isn't always the best answer. Sometimes we have to move through that. And an intent to heal, well, sometimes we'll lose sight of the bigger picture. We'll lose sight of the lesson that we need to. So we need to experience those things in our life so we can go deep and we can find out, hey, what's going on? What is my lesson? What do I need to learn? What do I need to know? What do I need to see that my eyes are closed to? Often when we perceive a situation as impossible or painful, it's actually the complexity of human life, human existence revealing itself. Most of us bring to everyday life somewhat of a naive attitude in our expectations that our lives and our relationships are going to be simple. Does anybody have everyone in their life that's a simple relationship? Okay, good, because I don't either. Not everyone in my life is simple. In real life, we're called to embrace contradiction. We're called to embrace that paradox through relationships, through situations. Look with special attention and an open heart at what you might be rejecting in your life, and then speak lovingly to and for that rejected element. And that's something that Nancy's been teaching me for 20 years, right? You bless things, you release them, you send them love and compassion and wellness and happiness and love. And when you do that with every experience in your life, and it changes you, and it changes the experience. We tend to divide experience into two parts, right? It's either good or it's bad. We forget to consider that there could just be value in those things that we reject. When we name certain experiences negative, we may simply be protecting ourselves from an unknown fear that is lying deep within. Our spirit feeds on whatever life grows in our immediate environment. To our soul, the everyday is sacred, and the everyday is the primary source of our faith. When we try and live fully consciously in this intellectually predictable world, protected from all mysteries and comfortable with conformity, what happens? We lose our moment-to-moment opportunity to live a soulful life. We're on autopilot. Our soul wants to draw inward. It seeks that contemplation, craving the depths of reflection, layers of meaning, nuances, references, insinuations. Our soul is looking for those things. Growing old is one of the ways that our soul nudges us. It nudges itself to attention to that spiritual aspect of life. Our body's changes. It teaches us about time, about nature, about mortality, and about character. Aging forces us to decide what is important in life. Haven't you found that? When we allow the great possibilities of life to enter into us and embrace those possibilities, we're then expressing our own spirituality. And spirituality doesn't just arrive fully formed for us without effort. It requires attention, and it requires our present moment awareness. It requires us seeing the sacred in the everyday, in the every moment. It requires finding a way through our experiences and into our ambitions. I see the Bible as a beautiful guide for every man, not necessarily literal. And I want to share this with you. Because when Jesus was standing in the Jordan River, he was about to begin his life's work. And that is a significant moment in any man's life. If we look at that, and look at the Jordan River representing the willingness to live fully, to have our own work, to have our own mission, to be cleansed and to be blessed. What a great way to bring that into our life. Also to have that willingness to go courageously into the river of existence instead of finding ways to remain safe and dry and unaffected. We need to step into life. There is a sense of sacred in each individual life on this planet. And the sacred quality is not just value, because every single life is valuable. It's the profound mystery that is the very seed and heart of every single individual. And that seed appreciates the mystery of human suffering and doesn't offer the illusion of a problem-free life. It sees every fall into ignorance and confusion as an opportunity to discover that beast residing at the center of the labyrinth is also an angel. I'm going to close this morning with a short verse from the Wu Jing, which is Lao Tzu's verbal teachings. The cords of passion and desire weave a binding net around you. Worldly confrontation makes you stiff and inflexible. The trap of duality is tenacious. Bound, rigid, and trapped, you cannot experience liberation. Through dual cultivation, it is possible to unravel the net, soften the rigidity, dismantle the trap. Understand this, if nothing else. Spiritual freedom and oneness with the Tao are not randomly bestowed gifts, but the rewards of conscious self-transformation and self-evolution. It's up to you. Thank you for being here while I share this truth as I understand it.